So I feel kind of bad for Akainu. When you're talking about, the major villains in the series, especially when it comes to endgame, we're talking about Blackbeard, and now we're talking about Imu. And even if you weren't talking about Imu before, you were extremely skeptical of, just how big of a baddie Akainu really is. So if you were speculating like the endgame battle in MavisHdz, you have the Marines and the Gorosei and Imu. What is Akainu going to be? Is he going to be rolled over as the strats go to some enemy that is way more important than him? Or hell, some people are even saying that Akainu is not somebody that Luffy really needs to fight and defeat. That's Sabo's opponent. Luffy does not even need to defeat the very strongest and most villainous, most important of all the Marine Admirals. And so whether or not I agree with these ideas is neither here nor there. Personally, I'm not entirely sure. I'm kind of sitting along with the majority of everybody else, just sort of wondering, where Akainu is going to fit in. What I do have, though, what I find to be an equally important question is what Akainu is going to do to completely change the direction of the story. So today I want to show a little love for our man in red, Fleet Admiral Akainu. Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, the Marines talk a big game about pirates in general, how bad they are, we must eliminate them, we must capture them. But the reality is that pirates and Marines coexist together, and neither seems to have an overwhelming agenda to destroy the other. Of course, this is a fairly obvious conclusion at this point in the story, but when you lay out all of the things, it's kind of ridiculous. The Marines and the world government legitimize some pirates, giving them the title of a warlord, which essentially means that they don't have to do shit for the government or for the Marines, with the exception of very, very particular situations which arise once every maybe decade. But otherwise, they seem to be able to continue their lives as normal with no obvious change, with the possible exception of attacking civilians and attacking Marines. But probably the stance of the world government is that if we can't cover it up, then it's a problem. Or I suppose in the case of Gecko Moria, the world government no longer believes them strong enough, powerful enough to be deserving of this protection. But yeah, outside of the Warlords, you have the Yonko themselves, which are, as far as we are aware, pretty much ignored by the world government. I mean, there's some policing between the borders, they don't want Yonko to fight other Yonko, but you never really get the sense of an immediate plot to take them down. The pirates are essentially allowed, or maybe they can't be helped, from ruling the New World. Shanks, a Yonko himself, is seen during the reverie visiting the Gorosei by himself to give them some advice. That's how it is. Or even in the most recent chapters, we can see that the world government specifically commissions the Shogun and Kaido for the weapons that they are producing. They're in business with the Yonko Kaido. And in reality, they have been for many years, although they don't like to make that connection too obvious, because they used the middleman, another pirate, Doflamingo, beforehand, before Luffy defeated him. And so we can see some Marines and the Gorosei talking about the future of Blackbeard, how they don't really want him to become a Yonko, but they don't actually try to stop him, they wait for Marco to do it for them, and they assume he will fail. And yeah, you might say that these are all, to various degrees, top tier pirates, Warlords and Yonko, very powerful, but there's some trickle-down effect as well to some lesser pirates, even going back to the Arlong Park arc. The reason why Arlong could exist on this island, essentially holding its citizens as captives, as prisoners, as slaves, is because of the deal that he cut with Marines. But yeah guys, none of this is breaking news, as I said before. Oh my gosh, the world government is scum. How surprising, said literally nobody. However, I do believe that it is important to try and understand why things are the way that they are, and how I expect things to change very, very soon. So I guess I'll start off here. What exactly is the role of the Shichibukai? What exactly are they doing for the world government? And so, first off, there's cases like Doflamingo, who evaded capture and are just dangerous individuals, who essentially pressured the world government into giving him some kind of power. You also probably have individuals, such as in the case of Kuma, who essentially the world government has found something out about, and is holding something over his head. Essentially, they're extorting him for his services. But in the vast majority of cases, as it appears to me, the world government recruits strong pirates so that they can do exactly what they had done previously in the One Piece story, fight against the Yonko. They call it the balance of powers, and the Shichibukai are necessary because although there seems to be some sort of agreement, some sort of terms between the Marines and the Yonko, in the case that the Yonko decide to go off the rails to challenge the government, they want to have other strong pirates by their side. It seems to me to be some kind of safety mechanism. But I guess that this leads us into the other question, probably the more important question. Why don't the Marines usually attack the Yonko? And why don't the Yonko usually attack the Marines? What is this agreement? We don't have an actual answer for this, and I don't think that there are a whole lot of clues, but I do have what I believe to be a very strong speculation. The world government is undoubtedly afraid of the Yonko, and of pirates in general. And I imagine that they have been for 900 years or more. They are truly the only entity which rivals the world government in any facet. Yet over the course of this 900 plus years, to this day, pirates still exist. And I think that the reason for this is because the world government literally cannot stop it. Although at many points in history, I feel as though they probably tried. As Goldie Roger said, inherited will, the destiny of the age, and the dreams of the people. As long as people continue to pursue the meaning of freedom, these things will never cease to be. Why do people set out to the sea to become pirates? And a lot of the times it has to do with freedom. The freedom to rise above your station and acquire wealth or fame. The freedom to seek out new horizons and adventures. As long as people continue to pursue freedom, piracy cannot be stopped. In order to achieve true freedom, one must become a master of the sea, because the sea itself locks everyone in to their little worlds. For those who dream big, the sea itself is their highway. No matter how badly the world government may want to suppress this, no matter how much effort has been expended, no matter how many times they may have been successful, you cannot crush this. And so I think that this is where the world government and the Marines might run into a problem. The one thing that they hate, possibly more than pirates themselves, is the pursuit of the true history and poneglyphs. In order to discover these, one must adventure the Grand Line. And we know from Inu Arashi that the Grand Line in some way or another informs people of this journey by the time that you reach the end. So sailing the Grand Line quickly becomes sailing to find the poneglyphs. And so if you call yourself a pirate and along the way you cause some kind of mayhem, or you attack villages or countries or entire islands, of course, then the Marines might be a barrier for you eventually finding all of these clues. But as Luffy's journey has sort of emphasized to us, not everybody can be stopped. Over the course of the entire story, who posed a bigger threat to Luffy himself? Was it the Marines or was it pirates? I think it can easily be argued that the thing stopping most people from adventuring the Grand Line are not the Marines, because even if you look at law-abiding citizens, somebody who just wants to sail to another island because, they want to see what it looks like, the Marines can't legally stop that. But pirates can do as they please. I believe that at the very least, in the eyes of the leaders of the world government and maybe some Marines, pirates are a necessary evil. Along with maybe the weather and to a lesser extent the Marines, the pirates themselves defend the Grand Line from those who would want to explore it. So just like in several of the examples we provided earlier in this video, the Marines and the world government use the pirates to accomplish things that they themselves don't want to have to deal with, like for instance fighting other pirates. A lot less Marines die when the pirates are actually killing themselves off. And so going back to the beginning of this video, why the world government doesn't attack any particular Yonko, but rather patrols the borders and prevents them from fighting each other, well, they don't want one Yonko to end up reigning supreme over every other one. They want them to be equals so that each of them prevents the other from freely adventuring the Grand Line. This also explains why the world government didn't attempt to stop Blackbeard from becoming a Yonko, even though they assumed that was what was going to happen, because his existence as a Yonko is necessary, although they would prefer another in his place. But at the end of the day, the job of a Yonko is to compete and defend the new world against the other Yonko. You have to be able to stand your own. So yeah, guys, I think that it is a very precarious balance, but the world government has something to gain from the existence of pirates. But yeah, let's talk about the Gorosei and Imu now. And so, one of the most interesting scenes from the Reverie was when Imu appears to be looking at the bounty portraits of Shirahoshi, Blackbeard, Luffy, and Vivi. And the impression that I got from this scene, as Aimusama destroyed 3 of the bounty posters but took Vivi's with him to the top, to the throne, is that they wanted to select one problem, one person first. Maybe each represents its own individual war. And although all 4 may be a threat in their own ways, the world government is handling them one at a time. Which I think fits their expression throughout the story. Maybe not Aimusama because we've only seen him for the first time, but his acting hands are the Gorosei, who we've seen issue commands at several points in the story, and they seem to be very, very conservative. They don't do anything hastily. But even they admit that the balance of powers as of late have become harder and harder to control. For a group that for the most part acts conservatively, no matter who they choose from the 4 people listed, it's going to have serious ramifications, starting with Blackbeard, who is a Yonko. As we argued earlier, they need the Yonko, they need Blackbeard, but maybe Blackbeard even as a Yonko is just too dangerous. I think that the same applies to Luffy. He may not be really a Yonko yet, even if the world wants to give him that title, but he has so many different friends and so many different connections that to try and take him out, that's going to cause a stir. If they even suspect Luffy's relationship with Shanks, then they'll know that by attacking Luffy, potentially doing the same thing to Luffy that they try to do with Ace, might lead Shanks to their doorstep. Or even with how Luffy has wronged both Big Mom and Kaido, potentially capturing Luffy could result in them coming to the world government's doorstep, looking to get revenge on Luffy themselves. And frankly, despite how much of a threat Luffy is for all of his connections, who he is related to, everything that he has done, his mentality and personality as a whole, it might just be better to wait for Luffy to see if one of the other pirates kill him off first. And I think that attacking Shirahoshi and attacking Vivi are both kind of similar. With Shirahoshi, you attack Shirahoshi, you declare war on Fishman Island. You know what's going to happen immediately after that. The same applies to Vivi. You declare war on Alabasta, and then the membered countries of the world government begin to wonder, are we next? It's a delicate situation, and one that I'm finding more and more Marines becoming disillusioned with. I think that you can argue that Aokiji, after he left the Marines, feels like he can actually accomplish more. His first act is to join in some way the Blackbeard pirates, and it just begs the question of, after 30 or so years being a Marine, he looks at Blackbeard as representing something that he absolutely hates and could never deal with even as an admiral. Similar to the Chichibukai, the Yonko were not to be touched or aggravated, even while they did all sorts of horrendous things. Or you talk about Fujitora. Fujitora has done all sorts of, I would almost say, desperate things in order to make the Chichibukai enemies of the world government. Ensure that they absolutely must be abolished and the world government has no other choice in the matter. It seems pretty clear that Fujitora hates pirates, and the only thing that he hates more than pirates is the world government's protection of some of them. So I suppose that the general point that I'm making, guys, is that, yes, as a reader, we see the Marines and the world government's actions against the wrongs of the world, and we are dissatisfied with it. And I think that the same is true of many of the Marines themselves. I want you to look back at Marineford. Akainu was all for killing every single one of the pirates that happened to be there. He was not going to stop until every single one of them that could be killed were dead. And the only reason that he stopped was because of the former Fleet Admiral Sengoku. But the former Fleet Admiral is obviously not the Fleet Admiral anymore, Akainu is. And with new leadership comes new possibilities. I'd wager a guess, it hasn't been outright stated, but I'd wager a guess that Akainu is not satisfied with the way that the Marines have been operating. This balance of powers is unacceptable. Akainu represents absolute justice. Evil must be killed, whatever the cost. If you ask me what key role in the story of One Piece Akainu is going to play, I'm going to point out the differences between Akainu and Sengoku. Because I believe that Oda designed Akainu's character around what he intends to do with him as the Fleet Admiral. And that Oda intends to cause great change because of this, because of the differences between the two characters. One thing that Oda has hinted at since Akainu has become Fleet Admiral is that he does not always agree with the Gorosei, and has his own ways in which he wants to do things. And it emphasized that he cares a lot more than the Gorosei about the image of the Marines. I personally think that Oda might be setting up a future conflict, a conflict between Akainu and the world government's interests. In various One Piece communities, we talk extensively about how Akainu is the enemy of the Straw Hats, but I think Akainu might equally be an enemy to the Gorosei, although he is not too obvious about that. I want to make this very clear. Despite Akainu's temper, he seems quick to anger, maybe quick to action, he is also a schemer, and very clever. I really don't think that just anybody within the One Piece story would think to give Whitebeard a fatal blow by persuading to one of his own allies' insecurities. That's kind of next level. So Akainu may not sacrifice the image of the Marines in order to obtain what it is that he wants. What he is willing to sacrifice, though, is mass amounts of innocent lives, including those of the Marines themselves. And if he is looking to accomplish something against the will of his higher-ups, he would do so and find a way to checkmate them in the process, and force them to change their plans. Akainu is a dangerous individual, and I believe that his actions and his decisions are going to lead to the world burning. We talked before about how the Gorosei seem to be taking their time with the obvious problems at hand. So rather than trying to start many wars at the same time, they're focusing one at a time because that seems most prudent to them. But something that I don't think that Akainu would agree with, and something that seems ripe for Akainu to try to manipulate. So let's talk about Shirahoshi. If Akainu were to ever acquire the information that Shirahoshi is an ancient weapon, and the world government does not want to deal with that problem yet, Akainu very easily could let that information slip, let the world know, and force them to action. Force a war against the Fishman people. Simultaneously, the world government seems to have singled out Blackbeard as a huge threat, one in which they cannot or should not deal with right now because they need the Yonko. I think that this immediately brings up the war in Wano, because you have two Yonko already confirmed to be involved with Kaido and Big Mom. Again guys, speculation, but I assume strongly that the Gorosei do not want Big Mom to die. And maybe the same is true of Kaido regardless of what his plans might be. If you ask me what the Gorosei's intentions for the Marines in Wano, if they were to arrive, is to not escalate the conflict but rather stop it and separate the Yonko. If the Gorosei want this, I do not think that Akainu will let it happen. And in this, Fujitora, I believe, will be his ally. You ever wonder how Shanks got away with intervening in Marineford and essentially stopping the war by himself? Of course, Sengoku agreed, but what is the underlying reason for this? I think it's because you can't, if you're the world government, you can't afford to lose two Yonko at the very same time. It's probably the same reason why Shanks is allowed to go straight to the Gorosei and have a chat with them. He's protected and he knows it. They don't deem him as much of a threat as an ally to their cause, because the Yonko exist to prevent the existence of the Pirate King, which is what they are most afraid of. So assume for a moment that the end of the Wano Kuni arc results in the death of Kaido and Big Mom. We've also speculated that it may also result in the death of Shanks if he tries to intervene as he did in Marineford, and it doesn't work. He's forced to fight. That is worst case for the government. And if it all goes down like this, we would assume that the big winner out of all of this would be Luffy and Blackbeard, because they are surely not going down in Wano. This honestly might force the world government to take action against Blackbeard, who at that point would be far too powerful and dangerous. The same, of course, would be true of Luffy. A lot of people don't speculate this because I think that the majority of people don't really know what to speculate at all, but it seems incredibly feasible for the Marines to play a very important role in the story just before Luffy and or Blackbeard confront to become the king of the pirates and find the One Piece in Raftel. At the point that there becomes an inevitable conflict between the last two remaining candidates to become king, we assume again Luffy and Blackbeard, it almost forces the world government to take action to try and stop them both. Did you ever think that Akainu's final battle within the story could actually be before the final war? And depending on how it all shapes up, he could very easily be the kind of final antagonist within his own arc that we sort of thought would always be the case, but could never rationalize. Guys, I think quite a lot about a situation that would really satisfy me with the proper treatment of the Marine Admirals, which have been hyped up throughout the story, and as lesser villains before leading into I'm Sama and the Gorosei and, you know, whatever ends up happening there. It's not right to me. But a final conflict between the pirates themselves and the Marines before a king is chosen. That feels right. But anyway, guys, what I wanted to do was make you think a little bit about Akainu and what role he might play in One Piece and what it is that he might do in order to inspire the events to come. What really Oda has planned for him. But as always, I am curious as to what you guys think. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.